Top 5 companions in Magic the Gathering. Number 5, Umori, the Collector. 2 generic and 2 green-black hybrid for a 4/5 legendary ooze. Umori's condition is each non-land card in your starting deck shares a card type. As it enters the battlefield, you choose a card type. Then spells of that type cost 1 generic less for you to cast. Artifacts and creatures have been tried, but what seems to be the most successful card type to pair with Umori so far has been enchantments. There's plenty of enchantment-based removal and disruption, and they've also printed a ton of enchantment creatures in recent years, allowing you to have a well-balanced Enchantress deck despite the card type restriction. Number 4. Gigantha, the Wellspring. 4 generic and a hybrid red-green for a 5/5 legendary elemental elk. With the companion condition, no card in your starting deck has more than one of the same mana symbol in its mana cost. Then it can tap for 5 mana, one of each color, but that mana can't be used to pay generic mana costs. Gigantha has one of the easiest conditions to meet, which makes it appealing for a lot of decks, especially after a certain someone on this list went and got banned. Number 3. Lutri, the Spell Chaser. 1 generic and 2 blue-red hybrid for a 3/2 legendary elemental otter. It has flash, and when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, you get to copy an instant or sorcery you control. Lutri's companion requirement is each non-land card in your starting deck has a different name. Obviously, there aren't very many decks in normal constructed that want to be rolling singleton, so instead, Lutri shines in formats where everyone is running one copy of everything inherently, like Cube Draft or Commander. Well, maybe not Commander anymore. Lutri happens to be banned in that format. As someone who is not deep into Commander, I don't know the extent of Lutri's pervasiveness, but I would assume since every deck meets its companion requirement, basically every deck that had red and blue in it had a Lutri chilling on the side, which probably got silly. My experience with it has mostly been Cube Draft, where I like to go Izzet spells and pair it with stuff like Electrolyze and Big Score. Number 2, Yorian, Sky Nomad. 3 generic and 2 white-blue hybrid for a 4/5 legendary bird serpent with flying. It says when it enters the battlefield, exile any number of other non-land permanents you own and control, then they come back at the end of the turn. Yorian's condition, apart from crippling stage fright, is your starting deck must contain 20 cards more than the minimum deck size for whatever format you're playing. At the forefront of highly successful archetypes like 4 and 5 color Omnath and various control builds, Yorian seemed to be around every corner in Modern for a while. The ability to always have a late game threat built in for control decks, and a way to flicker cards with ETB effects in Omnath, and control for that matter, made it such an impactful card that Wizards eventually decided to ban it in Modern. Some of you may be thinking, how could a card that was so good it was banned in Modern not be number 1? Well, that's because the number 1 card on this list is also banned in Modern, and Pioneer, and Explorer, and Legacy, and probably from households all over the world. Number 1, Lurus of the Dream Den. 1 generic and 2 white-black hybrid for a 3/2 legendary cat nightmare with lifelink, but that's not enough to get you banned anywhere. It also says during each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. That is enough to get you banned everywhere. Its companion requirement is each permanent in your starting deck must have mana value 2 or less. Yep, thanks, I wasn't planning on breaking that rule anyway. Lurus dominated constructed Magic for what felt like ages. Suddenly every aggro deck had consistent fuel in the late game, and every mid-range deck crafted a lower-to-the-ground version to take advantage of the extra value. Everybody was scaling down their permanents to cater to the cat nightmare. Wizards finally put it to bed though, and there was much rejoicing. Honorable mention goes to Obosh, the Prey Piercer. He's an odd one. 3 generic and 2 black-red hybrid for a 3/5 legendary Hellion Horror that doubles all damage from any source you control with an odd mana value. Like Lurus, his companion requirement goes hand in hand with his ability. Your starting deck must contain only lands and cards with odd mana values. Though it definitely gets played, Obosh hasn't made too many waves in competitive constructed because it wants to be in an aggro-leaning deck, but it restricts the player from playing any 2-drops, and it's a 5-drop itself, which can be a tough sell. That being said, if hitting something with a lightning bolt for 6 damage sounds appealing to you, I recommend getting a hold of Mr. Prey Piercer. Follow for more top 5s.